You're watching News 24 Live. The Centre for Conflict Resolution in Cape Town is hosting a public dialogue on Tuesday night on the transformation struggles at South African universities. Dr. Amanda Hlengwa, who is a lecturer for the Centre for Higher Education at Rhodes University, is one of the guest speakers, and she joins us in studio this afternoon. Amanda, thank you very much for popping in before the dialogue. I believe you just come from the airport. So we appreciate your time. So this is obviously a very topical movement, I suppose, at the moment. It sort of, I guess, really, the ball really got rolling with the Rhodes Must Fall campaign, and then obviously culminated with Fees Must Fall. There's still flare-ups at universities around the country. Where is it currently sitting?
Sure. It assumes that there's one unified movement across the spectrum, which it isn't. Even within universities, there are splinter movements. But in terms of what did happen in the week in October last month, where we had the national shutdown, that was 1 week where ultimately all universities were in solidarity with the Fees Must Fall movement. So that was probably the moment in time where we all institutions were implicated or were in solidarity. But even then, some institutions at the end of the week were able to resume what looks like on the surface as normal, as in but barricades were taken down, as in people were able to go into classes, students were able to go to classes and stuff like that. But so the movement as it is right now, most students are in a position, I mustn't say most, a lot of students are in a position to be actually writing examinations as we speak, or have completed the examinations. At different institutions, it has been under a lot of police presence, security presence. In other institutions, it has been without those kinds of presences. So it really depends on each institution and how the negotiations between the various parties has unfolded. So my sense is that examinations are at the moment where people are focused on, but it does not necessarily mean that the movement has dissipated or died off. A lot of students and staff work both ends of it. So the front end going to examination, and the back end is trying to do the negotiations, do the thinking behind where do we go to from here.
Now, the dialogue this evening, why have you been chosen as a guest speaker? What, I mean, it is an interesting sort of dynamic of speakers. You've got Professor Samantha Weiss, who's from the Department of Philosophy at Wits. What are you guys hoping to gain from this dialogue this evening?
Well, largely you'd have to ask the CCR what they were aiming for. The reason why Sam and I were asked was because we contributed chapters to a book, being at home, looking at ultimately looking at institutional culture. There's a long title to it. So we contributed.
Is this the book that's going to be launched?
That's the book that's going to be launched.
Being at Home, Race, Institutional Culture, Transformation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Education.
So out of a lot of contributors, some of them are not residing in South Africa, have never resided in South Africa, but they have strong ties to various departments in South Africa. So it's a group of authors, academics who have looked at the idea of institutional culture from their vantage point, where it's their discipline, their own experience. So there's a bit of people looking at it from a disciplinary lens, which is what's largely influences Sam's chapter, whereas my chapter largely looks at it from an experience. So the experience of being a young black academic in an institution like Rhodes, what that must feel like, and what questions we should ask about how do we retain and attract and retain black academics on our campuses.
Well, I mean, you were saying you've been a lecturer, you've been working at Rhodes for 8 years. What has that experience been like then?
When I arrived at Rhodes...
In terms of the, institutional culture,
that's actually partly what my chapter looks at. When I arrived at Rhodes, I came as a Mellon Accelerated Scholar, which is a 3-year program. It's a contract, and after that, assuming you and your department and the institution think it's a good fit, you get screened into a position, a permanent lecturing position. So my own personal experiences have, as I speak about it in the chapter, have not been alienating, I've seen myself, or I term myself, people like me, as being a safe bet. Somebody whose own cultural capital that they bring is aligned quite nicely with institutional culture. Whereas people, colleagues of mine who are in the same program, have not enjoyed the same. Yeah, and that led me to question, what kinds of people are we trying to attract in a university like Rhodes, that which largely has a lot of whiteness, which is very different from being white, which it is as well, because predominantly white middle class male staff are at Rhodes, and so other races and gender are less representative on our staffing, academic staffing, as well as the higher levels in other staffing complements of the institution.